Okay, so welcome everyone to today's social system mapping deep session for today, March 18th, 2024. As usual, your hosts today are me and Kara. And what we're going to do today is sort of take a new approach. I'll talk about it more in a minute, but so we're going to start with chat intros, and then Seth and I will do some thought partnering. He's going to share with us what he's up to with a Dual Elements project, modifying it for his specific context. Then we'll have some questions and answers towards the end. Actually, I should have edited this agenda a little different, but that's what we'll do. And then if you want to stick around for our informal after half hour, we'll have that happening as well. I see we got a couple new people just came in. I just want to, Richard, if you want to do a quick mic check, I welcome that.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, good morning, welcome. Amy, do you want to do a quick mic check?
Good morning.
Good morning. Amy's in Minneapolis, where I live, visiting.
Wow.
Not visiting me personally, but she's here in town. And Denise, mic check. If you want. Maybe Denise is not fully technically arrived yet, I can't tell. Okay, just jump in and say hi when you get in. So let's go ahead and start and do our chat intros. And I'm just going to stop sharing. And so go ahead and in the chat, you can share your name, pronoun, location, if you would. It's an invitation. It's not a command. And when you're done with that, feel free to put share with us a primary network that you're part of, or that you're working with or thinking about. And then what brings you here today? And Denise, I'm wondering if you'd like to do a quick mic check, if you've arrived technically. Maybe not. That's fine. I'm guessing there's like a lot of noise or something going on and you don't. Oh, I see you've unmuted. No, you muted again. Okay, we'll see if Denise is gonna be.
Hello?
Hi.
Hi. Sorry, I'm doing this today on my phone and I can't find all my buttons. So it's just to even get you here. I am here and I am listening. Hello, everyone. And I will be sorted in a minute. I don't know what's going on.
I was guessing it was something like that. So
yeah, that's all. That's all. I'm going to get on my computer very soon. So I will be fully
pressure.
present, but I'm here.
Glad you're with us. Okay. So just give us all, I'm just want to appreciate everyone's sharing of their where they are and what they're working on and why they're here. And taking a look at it. And okay, so today, so we're sort of some of you were here last month when I started this new approach, and what I'm starting to do with deep dives, not exclusively doing this, but doing more of this, is I get requests from people in our network or people who are working on a social system map, not all the time or constantly, but not infrequently, from mappers to take a look at their their use case, what they're doing. Either it's an upfront, how can I, do what I've what I'm doing, or a mid-process, this is what I've done, what do you think, I want to XXX, etc. I get these sort of requests, and I always get a lot out of having those conversations. People think they're going to pick my brains, and they do, and that seems to be valuable to them. But often it's also the case that I get new ideas, I get more insight into the various kinds of contexts people are working in. I learn a lot from sort of jumping into this someone else's context and digging deeply into a specific case, as opposed to how we often do our deep dives, which is talk about a topic in a sort of general way, but but not related to a specific case. And I realized that I get so much out of those that it seemed to me like it would be a great idea to let other people sit in and get to watch those conversations, even if they're not. So it's not so much of a conversation with the whole group. It'll be mostly a conversation with Seth and I, but I think that it will be, my hope is that it becomes something useful for everyone. And so just to frame up what we're going to do, it's mostly Seth and I talking. Seth's going to do a little bit of presenting. I will ask him questions, and then he will, we will see what comes up between us for his case. And so that's the new sort of format, a thought partnering fishbowl kind of a format a little bit. And we're going to focus on Seth's needs. So, and just a thing to say is Seth's doing a bunch of technical extra stuff that I think will be interesting and thought-provoking for everyone. And maybe we'll push my thinking. And it's not stuff that everyone can do. Like, you won't just pick up a project and jump in and be able to start doing it, because Seth has some technical skills that many of our mappers don't have. So I want to have that caveat to say it'll be interesting, and it's possible to probably hire someone to do some of the things that Seth can do, but I don't want you to go away feeling like, yes, I'm going to do that and it's going to be easy, because it might be out of the normal skill set. So having said all that, welcome, Seth. I'll let you introduce yourself, and we'll just go ahead and jump in.
Okay, thanks, Christine. So I am Seth Horwitz. I work with the American Friends Service Committee. And are you going to do the basic SSM background, or are we just going to go? Oh, okay.
We're just going to jump in so we can spend all our time on your situation.
Oh, how nice. Okay, so I've been coming to this community for a while now, which I've been dropping in and out. It's been really a satisfying sort of environment to be talking to people who think in network weaving terms, because in my organization, I'm the only one who really talks like that without getting bored. And so it's good to be able to share these ideas with like-minded people. I put together a rough PowerPoint, and let me see if this will work. So actually, let me go to presentation mode and. Okay, so you're seeing this title slide?
Yep.
Great. Okay, so a little information about the American Friends Service Committee. It's a Quaker organization. I'm not Quaker. Most of the staff are not Quaker. The board is Quaker. The general secretary is Quaker, and it has a great deal of Quaker influence, practice, and stuff like that. Been around for over 100 years, a Nobel Peace Prize laureate, and we have about 50 programs in this country and around the world dealing with various different peace and social justice topics and issues that are often what are referred to as wicked problems, difficult, intractable, systemic issues that need lots of people to work on lots of aspects of them. Our central office is in Philadelphia, where I live. Some of you may know that Philadelphia is kind of a hub of Quaker activity from William Penn's days. So it's not surprising that things are there. You can find out more about the organization at the website, ifsc.org. I have a fancy title of information architect and internet manager. Information architect is one of those vague terms, kind of like network weaver, but also it can mean various different things. In my view, though, I work in the IT department, and I come from an orientation as a librarian. I have a master's in library science, and I've worked in a library environment, and that's really my orientation. So I work with the kind of the knowledge management and information management perspective on stuff as we're going forward here. The AFSC went through a years-long process to create a new strategic plan that's supposed to cover the 10 years of the current decade. We've actually been slow in getting started in implementation. We're starting to get some traction now in the last year or so in terms of implementing that strategic plan and reorganizing the organization to support it. There's a lot of things in the strategic plan. Obviously, I won't go through it, but I wanted to highlight a couple of different things here. One thing is that the 50 or so programs that we have are being thought of in terms of overarching themes, which are colloquially referred to as just peace, just migration, and just economies. Most of the programs deal with, primarily with one of these themes. Several of them deal with more than one of the themes. But it provides the idea of the themes are to provide an organizing principle around which the programs can kind of coalesce in terms of their theories of change and the underlying processes and outputs and objectives that the various programs and program staff are working on. In addition, the strategic plan refers to some commitments that didn't make it into the themes. I'm not sure exactly how to characterize these, but these are kind of cross-cutting commitments that are that inform a lot of the work we do of climate justice, anti-racism and oppression, gender justice, and youth work. And finally, another kind of cross-cutting way of looking at the work, or the aspiration of how we want to achieve this work, is by recognizing methods that have been successful over the decades of advocacy, bridging and convening, research, and then the community organizing and strengthening of civil society, particularly in international programs. The other thing that the strategic plan did was it placed a good deal of emphasis on systems work and systems thinking, which is in some ways vague and difficult to make concrete, but there's a commitment to trying to look at that stuff, to look at the work we're doing from a systemic lens. And the little graphic here tries to contextualize where networks fit into that. I think of networks and systems as being cousins of one another. They're really different manifestations of the same thing. But there's a commitment to doing this, and we're working on ways to try and make to make that as effective as possible. So what I want to talk about to contextualize this stuff is that we can look at AFSC or any organization from both an organizational perspective as well as a network perspective. And the simplistic way of doing that, which I think is, well, I don't think it's really the best way of looking at it, is to think of the organization, to think of AFSC or any organization, that it's an organization and then it's a network, and to think of it in those two terms. And this is a true statement, or both of these are true statements, but I think that this is inadequate and insufficient as a way of thinking about the two different perspectives. Because really, I think a more accurate way of thinking about it, or the way that I think about it, is that on the one perspective, AFSC is an organization, and on the other, AFSC is, and any organization, is really just at the nexus or creates a nexus of lots of different networks that are overlapping and intersecting and changing all the time. And so I think it's important to think of an organization, and in AFSC's case, we're dealing with difficult projects, difficult problems around the world. We have a lot of activists that are on staff that are working on these different programs, and I think that there's a dynamic tension between being an organization and being looking at things from a network perspective, because the organization has certain needs in terms of some degrees of centralized authority and management to be an organization, to pay the bills, to pay my salary, for which I'm quite grateful that I don't have to fundraise my own salary. And there's a lot of network relationships that are always happening. And I think that the idea of trying to really look at these, both of these ways of looking at it are sometimes in tension. And what I wanted to try and do was to see how we can combine these perspectives in terms of a new directory that we're creating. So we are in the IT department, we're creating a new organizational directory that will be available to and describe AFSC staff and governance members. One of the characteristics of an AFSC, of a Quaker organization, is it tends to have a large governance structure. So we have 300 or so staff people around the world, and we have somewhere between 100 and 200 governance people who are in various different committees and different things that are working from a governance perspective. And so what I was attempting to start to look at and to start to design here was to build a directory that would be able to accommodate both of these perspectives combined. A couple of other quick notes before we get into what it looks like is that in our organization, we do have a strong emphasis on digital security. My boss, who's the director of IT, has a specialization in digital security, and we're very sensitive to that. We've been attacked, cyber attacked, and we're conscious of that. And a lot of our activity is maintained within what we think of as a secure Microsoft cloud environment that uses SharePoint, and we want to include. We want to, as I'll show you, we've embedded a lot of the stuff that we're doing with sumApp and Kumu within the SharePoint environment, so that the public doesn't have direct access to it. I also just wanted to say a word about metadata and facets. Facets may or may not be a familiar term to people. I just want to, but I'll be using it, so I want to make sure that we're on the same page about that. I think of when we're talking about any body of objects that we're looking at, the descriptive data about those objects is often referred to as metadata, and facets are a way of describing the rather specific ways in which the specific aspects of that metadata. What I wanted to show real quick was my good example here that I like to use is Zappos. Are you seeing the Zappos thing now? Okay, good. So if you're looking for shoes on Zappos or something like that, all these things here, the size, the brand, the type, the price, the color, all these are facets of shoes that are describing the metadata. And and in this case, what we're looking at is we're going to be looking at the facets that describe the individuals that are featured in the directory, the staff and governance people in the directory. So that's what I mean by that. So let's get into it. When I'm thinking about the facets that could describe the individuals at FSC, I'm dividing it largely into two different groups. There's the organizational facets, which are what you typically think of for a directory. People's job title, the department, who they report to, membership, anything that really is information that somebody within the organization has the authority for determining. In contrast to that, there are the self-expressed facets that people say about themselves. Here's something about me that I want others to know about. And just a couple of examples here are, the experience that people have with particular nonviolent tactics, for instance, or experience or interest in community education, which is a funny example to put in here, but I put it in here because it's an example that I can show something about as we progress here. So the idea, so what I'm going to say here, I'm sorry, this whole idea of having this session here came about after I was querying Christine about the dual elements feature, because I ran into a snag and I needed some help, and she provided some help very, very kindly and very promptly. And I said, I'd really like to show you about what I'm doing. She said, well, why don't we do a deep dive? And that's what we're doing. We're going to get into the dual elements thing, but that's going to come at the end of this little story, because I'm going to contextualize this in terms of what we're doing and how I'm using sumApp and Kumu. But it's really, what you'll see here is the context, the broader context in which those things are being used. So we actually won't get to the dual elements till later, but I wanted to just preview that. So AFSC needs a new directory. We don't have a really good one right now. And the simplest way of looking at stuff is simply to get the organizational metadata, the organizational facets together, and put it onto a SharePoint page and let people search it. Actually, that's a little more difficult than it sounds because of the trying to get accurate information, especially with changes happening within the organization from the restructuring and stuff like that. But that's starting to happen. But in addition to that, we want to be able to, excuse me, show the organizational structure within, or I want to be able to show it within a Kumu network map. And so that kind of thing is set up. And I'm going to show it. I'm sorry here. Okay, this is a current example of the organization chart that's done just directly with Kumu. And this allows you to zoom in and to see the different departments and stuff like that. It it supports multiple language sort of features and hyperlinks, so people can go and go to the different features, in this case the IT department, and it's translated into the major languages that we have staff that are working on stuff, so they can do that. And a major feature of this representation is that these elements are pinned. That is, that they stay where they're being put. So if I move this person over here, whoops, I have to get out of preview mode. If I move somebody somewhere else, they'll stay there. And that's an aspect of stuff that we'll talk about a little bit more as we proceed with this. So so far you haven't seen any mention of sumApp, and in this at this point sumApp is not being used. Where it does start to get used is in the next version here, or the next aspect of things, which is the ability for people to put in their own information about themselves, which goes through the sumApp survey page and then gets populated into the another representation, which is the another Kumu map that people can see with that they would have access to. The way that I've set this up, or I'm trying to set this up, is that the data that goes into this kind of co-created directory is all of the organizational facets that are being just directly uploaded into sumApp through a CSV upload, which is a capability that sumApp enables, so you can upload some data as opposed to having individuals upload their own data. And for this organizational metadata, these organizational facets like job title, that's what we want to do. We don't want people filling in a sumApp survey to say, this is my job title, when in fact they don't have authority over what their job title is or who they report to and what department they're in. That stuff is centrally controlled. And so that information is being uploaded directly into sumApp and is not modifiable by the individuals. The individuals, on the other hand, can put in their own information, and the number of facets that will be self-expressed will grow, I think, dramatically over time. So the project that people interact with, which is being supplemented by organizational metadata, goes into a more robust version of the directory that is using sumApp, is using the sumApp connection with Kumu, and this will continue to evolve over time. The example that I have to show, which is just kind of a little bit of a prototype-y type example, is sorry. There was recently a meeting of folks interested in community education, and here are some of the individuals are in the blue dots, and the methods, the purposes, or the communities or locations they worked in are represented by the various different boxes here, which are is using Kumu's clustering feature, so that these are data that people would put in about their own interest in community education in order to see that they might be working with certain methods like liberation theology or music or storytelling. They might be working with for certain purposes of community organizing, housing, etc. In different communities of people or in different locations. Now, in this particular example, it's contrived. It's contrived in the sense that I put the data in instead of people putting it in themselves. But it was based on basically the transcript from the initial meeting. We had an hour and a half meeting where people just introduced their interest into this stuff. And I just took the transcript and I just contrived that. The way it would work is with, the way it would work is by people going into their own profile page in sumApp. Oops. Sorry. And then indicating what their interests were. But for demonstration purposes, I just put that stuff in there. While we're here, let me show you what we're looking at here. Go back here. This is a SharePoint page on our intranet. It's not publicly available yet, or not available to the rest of AFSC yet. Just something I'm working on right now. And so the idea here is that only people who are credentialed to get into the intranet, that is, only AFSC people can get to this page. And the way it's also designed is that their link to various maps and stuff. This is not really a default map, but there's an example of just the Kumu map is being embedded within the within the SharePoint environment. So again, only people who are logged in. I'm logged in as myself, Seth here, so that I can see this. The other aspect of this is that people's personal sumApp pages would be available here, as opposed to emailing them the link to their sumApp page. And so the way this is set up is that, again, this is just set up for a couple of people here, but because I have administrative rights, I can see all of these pages, but it's set up in such a manner that in this example of Rick Wilson, if he logs in with his credentials, he would only see his name. He would only see one line here, and that's the one he would click on, or Kate Beal would only see one line. That's what she would click on. But if someone clicks on their own page, then they get to the sumApp page embedded within the SharePoint environment. And the reason we're doing that is a security issue, because the sumApp pages are individualized by having a complex URL, a URL with a 15-digit scrambled code in it, which is felt within our environment to be not secure enough, because we want people to be able to share their information with confidence that they know who's able to see it. And so one of the things that is being done here is to basically embed the sumApp interface and the various Kumu map interfaces within the secure intranet environment that we have. So that's one aspect that I wanted to share with you. So the other aspect of stuff about this is that that I found out from Tim, and I haven't experimented with it very much, is in the this section. I relabeled about me. On most places it says profile, but this is where the section in the sumApp survey interface in which people put information about themselves. One of the recent innovations that Christine announced a few months ago was the ability to have data in here that's not changeable directly by the user, which is what this is. So these are the organizational metadata, job title, etc., are things that can't be changed. And this is just placeholder text. But basically, the idea is that if someone said, "Oh, that's not my job title, I want it to be changed," they would have a means for doing that through the organizational mechanism that would allow them to, a question would go to HR, and whatever to be able to change those things would happen. And then below that, I put the popular education questions, because that's what I had the opportunity to work on. That was a good example, so that people can put in their stuff like that. And below that, I started to do some stuff about nonviolent tactics, and there's about 50 or 60 of those that would be included that people might use for different purposes and stuff like that. So one of the things I found out from Tim that I haven't done a lot of experimenting with is that by using the HTML element that sumApp offers, I could set up here kind of a table of contents, so people could jump to a section below. And so there's no reason that this couldn't have 100 or 200 questions that are generated by different people that might be of interest to other people within the organization. And this will give us the opportunity to allow staff people to self-declare information about themselves in terms of that might be relevant to the various themes we have, the just peace, just migration, just economies, in terms of the various core methods that we use, the research and analysis, the convening, the advocacy, and the commitments, gender justice, climate justice, etc. All of those can have metadata about them that people can self-declare. This is an interest of mine. This is a commitment that I have. This is experience that I have. And so this section of the profile section, in effect, can grow to an almost unlimited size of questions and not be so overwhelming, because people can just look at the table of contents and say, that's what I'm interested in. That's what's important to me. That's where I have some passion and some background. That's where I'll share information about myself. And then that goes immediately into the into the map itself. So so essentially the directory itself is comprised of we'll have several different sections to it. The reason we have a text-based list is because we have some people working in environments that have inconsistent internet access and don't have great bandwidth, and so rendering the Kumu maps can be challenging, and so they can still search for information through a text-based thing, but that's only going to have the organizational metadata. And this this co-created directory will basically have all the data and all the bells and whistles and features that are either coming from the organization or from individuals themselves. So that's what the directory aspect will look like. The other aspect where we get into the core of the dual elements is that we are also developing a database of external stakeholders. So these are partners we work with, funders, various different networks or agencies we deal with, and stuff like that. So these can be uploaded through sumApp's CSV upload into sumApp into a different project, a different sumApp project, which goes to a different Kumu project. And this is where the dual elements feature comes in, so that when you are looking at the at your sumApp directory, I think most people are familiar with being able to see the profile tab and the connections, which allow you to express connections with other members of the network. This external connections tab, which was called something else before I changed the name, I think. This is what allows people to say, okay, I have a relationship with the Geneva Peacebuilding Platform that we haven't worked on what the questions are for this, but these can be answered right away, and using some of the same metadata if it's appropriate. So nonviolent tactics are a form of, can represent a facet that is interesting and useful to know about internal stakeholders like staff and governance people, as well as external stakeholders like organizations we might want to create strategic partnerships with. And so, so what this allows people to do then is to add in information about their external folks. And we had an earlier example of this sort of thing, which was done with this was done several years ago, but you could see, for instance, if you select one of these organizations, the U.S. Institute of Peace, that you can see who had strong relationships with it, who had less strong relationships with it, and we can basically use this as a collective way of seeing what our internal stakeholders, the relationship we have with external stakeholders out in the world. So I'm sorry. This organizational project is, as I said, a separate project that's linked to the people project through the Dual Elements feature that allows people in their profile to then manage that information. At the moment, at the moment, it's important to understand, or at least the way it's designed, is that these external stakeholders have no agency. That is, they're not a part of this. They're only objects that internal stakeholders can evaluate and can manage their relationship with. So so that's what that is about. I think that I missed a couple of questions here, and I'm going to stop that sharing and find where they went. That's funny. Okay, so I don't know where that went, and I won't, but I will stop sharing. Am I still sharing? Yes, I am. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. So that's the general scenario. There's a couple of design principles that I feel are important to making this effective, and I'm making the assumption that they're important, and that's part of what I wanted to ask about and get some feedback on. So the two that I think are most prominent have to do with boundary and privilege. By boundary, what I mean is that I think it's very important that there be a clear and transparent declaration of who is part of this directory, but not only who's part of the directory, but who is able to put in information about themselves and have full access to the directory. So that would be, for instance, all staff people, and probably some subset of governance people, but maybe not all governance people. Though all governance people would be shown in the map because they are, it's important that they be part of the directory. But some of them are more peripheral to the organization. And when I struggle with the question about boundary, the reason I think that boundary is important is that if people are going to share information about themselves and they're going to want to be honest, that means that they're also being vulnerable about themselves and what they're sharing. And so it's important for people to have a clear understanding of who will see their words. If I say that this is a passion of mine, this is an interest, this is background that I have, I want to share it in an environment in which I have confidence that the people who will see it are people that I can trust and that I do trust. And so part of that, I think, is achieved by having some clarity and transparency about who is in and who is out of that group. And then that relates to privilege, because I think that the way that I see it being designed is that those people who are in the group, who have the ability to have agency over their own information, which I'll call participants, as opposed to elements, because I think there might be more elements than participants. But the participants are privileged because they can answer any of the questions, they can say anything they want about themselves. It's totally voluntary. And so I expect that we'll have some participants who would never share information, additional information about themselves, and only the organizational facets would be displayed about them. And that's fine. And in addition, participants can suggest and support their own facets. So if a participant decides, thinks that it would be helpful to know about some aspect of other people, or wants to find out who else is interested in this aspect that, has sparked their passion, we can put that in here. Anyone can suggest that, we can get that in here, but then it's going to be up to them to champion it. So it's not going to be my job to go beat the bushes to say, who wants to say what their favorite color is. If that's something that's important to someone, then they can beat the bushes themselves and get people to respond to that. So the metadata itself, the facets, would be determined primarily by participants about what's important to them. And basically anyone who is on the inside, I'm using stark terms of privilege here, but basically the privileged people are the ones who are the participants on the inside. They have full access to the data. They have full ability to express themselves and even to influence what can be expressed by others. Whereas, the folks who are, not, who are not participants don't have that ability and wouldn't have access to it. So, so that's the general, that's the kit and caboodle. It definitely uses and depends upon sumApp, which provides the just critical feature of being able to update your own data and immediately see the results. I think that is so critically important. And it is contextualized within this broader environment. And I think just one thing I guess I'll show again about this. This thing is that the reason that there are there's actually two sumApp projects linked to two Kumu projects that are managing all the information about the people in the organizations. And this is a separate Kumu project that has nothing to do with sumApp because the organization chart needs to have pinned elements. And that's not something that can be supported through the JSON connection that sumApp uses to produce Kumu maps. So that so it creates a hopefully temporary, but an extra burden or an extra step that as the data gets updated, the organizational data gets updated, we need to convey that update directly into the Kumu project for the organization chart, as well as into the sumApp project for the co-created stuff that is not pinned. So, so that's an example of something that we've done that extends beyond sumApp's current capabilities or Kumu's current capabilities of maintaining that, both a pinned map as well as unpinned. And then the other aspect, which is a little funky, is trying to embed all of this within a SharePoint environment. So these are all within embedded pages and not available on the public intranet. Okay, I'm done. Those are my assumptions. I posed a couple questions, and that's open to other questions. So go for it.
That was really great. I mean, I really appreciated how you, especially how you broke down the data flows in a way that was really understandable and built on itself, as opposed to just the fire hose of how the data flows, which would come out of my mouth. So that was really a helpful way of presenting that and sharing what you're doing. And it's cool. It's really cool, as well as the work obviously is really valuable and important. I mean, the content of what the organization is doing globally. So that was also interesting and cool to see. And okay, so since don't have a whole lot of thought partnering needed, which is just fine.
Well, we do. I mean, I guess I'm wondering, the question about boundary and privilege, do those assumptions make sense?
They do. And I'm wondering what is the underlying, maybe it doesn't make sense that you're having that makes you wonder that.
Well, as I said, I think that we have a very large governance structure. Some are more peripheral than others, and so I feel like staff people who may need to be to warm up to the idea about sharing information about themselves are more likely to do that within a more defined closed group than within a very wide group. And the sense of trust diminishes as the network increases.
Well, and one of the things that at first I was a little confused, because I had assumed that governance meant staff, so that like within a network, the governance of the network is usually the members of the network, as opposed to sort of less enmeshed people. And so it took me a moment to catch that. And then I realized, oh yeah, like a board of directors or that kind. So you have some external governance that has a lot of power, I'm assuming. And yeah, it makes sense for staff to want to make sure that the staff feel relatively safe. And
I guess Christine, I think, well, what I heard from Seth, and I know a little bit about the American Friends Service Committee from 45 years ago, and but the governance that he's talking about, and not because I was a member of that, but the governance that he's talking about is embedded within the staff. I mean, it's a wide set of people who are involved in some governing decisions. It's not external necessarily.
It's a good point, Richard. And I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but Christine is right that when I'm talking about governance, I'm talking about the board of directors and various other committees and stuff like that are part of the are not on staff per se, but are part of the governance structure of AFSC. And you're also right, Richard, because in many cases they are deeply embedded with staff in terms of their day-to-day work and activity, but they're not on staff, they're not on payroll. And so some are more integrated than others. And that I think speaks to what the question is, I want to include some governance because there's often, a sense of not feeling like one organization. And I can see, the board of directors and certain, program committees and stuff being involved, whereas other folks that are more peripheral might, not engender the same degree of confidence and trust among staff to share their information. That's just one of the dilemmas.
Yeah. So Seth, another thought that's coming to me is that, I mean, usually I recommend that the privacy, non-privacy, so this is just a deeper degree of privacy, non-privacy, that conversation not be decided by one person or by the main person, but that there be a collective conversation.
And it would be.
Yeah. And so that would, I have cats bugging me. That might be another way to approach. I mean, that would be probably the best way to approach that, is to have that as a conversation and maybe come up with some criteria for which governance people, I mean, if they're deeply embedded and they're highly, you know, already collaborating, that might, you know, argue for having them have access to the map as opposed to the further away ones, something like that. Yeah.
I'd also like to hear Christine and others about this notion of trying to combine the interests of the organization from the organizational perspective and the network perspective, because I think those are different. There's different motivations there. There's different
Yeah.
incentives.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm hoping to be able to combine these into a single place that people can get that information.
That's a big piece that's interesting about what you're doing is your effort to combine those two and to sort of honor the perspectives of each, or at least take the tension between each into consideration. I see people wanting to map an organization, but just sort of pretending that the organization power structure, I mean, just sort of hiding that. Anyway, I see ways of not really doing it well or thoughtfully trying to combine them. And I see you being very thoughtful about that. Was there, and I'm noticing we have 3 minutes left. Are you sticking around for the additional half hour? How
Sure.
about if we pause here and just see if anybody who's jumping off has anything they want to share before they jump off, and then we'll come back to this after the top of the hour. Just want to share or a question they have for Seth. Not seeing any faces looking like they need to jump in. Kara, do you want to do a quick bit of announcements before we jump off?
Sure, let me just pull that up real quick here. And it'll take a second to put links in the chat. But our first Mondays are sense-making sessions. I believe Amy Moritz and Curtis are still leading those for the next time around. Our second Mondays, we do our on-ramp sessions, and we are still looking for a map. If somebody has one that they might be in the mood to share and would like to offer up, please feel free to email me if you'd like to do that. On our third Mondays, we have our deep dive session. I believe we're still holding for a topic for that one, but stay tuned and you can always register and then receive the topic later. And then for this upcoming fourth Monday of this month in March, which will be next Monday, Amy is going to do a walkthrough of Tim's header maker. And so that's very useful if you already have some pre-existing data that you'd like to import into sumApp. And that does have some tier restrictions, I'm sure that we'll mention, but if you need to use like a large data set and you want to double check for any kind of missing names or duplicate emails, it's a really handy tool to just kind of clean up all of your data and have that ready to go. I will put the links in the chat in just a moment, but those seem to be our main announcements.
Thank you for that, Kara. Okay, let's just do our for those of you who are jumping off, we'll all do the goodbye ritual. I'm assuming some of you are jumping off. I might be wrong, but we'll see who remains after the goodbye ritual. So we'll do the goodbye ritual, which is unmute. I'll count down 3, 2, 1, and then we'll all give each other our greetings for the day. And then if you want to stick around and pursue this, and it'll be sort of more open and informal once we jump off with Seth, then please stick around. So unmuted if you're going to do it. Ready? 3, 2, 1. Thank you all so much.
Thank
you.
everybody.
Oh.
Good to
Bye-bye.
see you today.
Yeah.
Love you all. See you soon. And no one seems to be going well. All right. So I'm sorry, where were you? So we were talking, I remember there was like, remind me, Seth.
Jim has asked a question
Jim had asked a question?
in the chat.
Is that what, can I want to?
Yeah, do whatever you want.
You were in the middle of something else.
Yeah, and I'm trying to remember what it was. There's something else. I thought I'd keep it, but too many new things entered my head.
Was it boundary?
It had to do with, it had to do with, okay. So that had to do with a question that you were holding that I was curious what was underneath it. Do you remember? But if I'm sorry,
I think you had asked about who the non-privileged elements and as opposed to the participants. Was it about that? Maybe it
what was
wasn't.
the next one?
I think it was just that
Oh,
you
the
had asked the question, Seth, and Christine responded, it's like, I don't see an issue here, but you're holding something. What is that?
Yeah, so I remember now. It was you were sort of questioning, you were asking for input about the organization network perspective tension between the two, and I was just sort of giving a general observation, but I was also wondering, was there something like deeper into that? Like what was making you wonder about that?
I'm not sure. I think that when we launch this, people will understand the organizational aspect of stuff. I mean, that's easy to understand. I think that understanding the network aspect is not as familiar to people.
Mhm.
And I want to make sure that people feel as safe as possible sharing information and as creative as possible to feel like what they have to share is important enough, is valid, just because they, if they feel it, it's valid, that it doesn't have to be something that is approved by anyone or judged by anyone.
Mhm.
And I think that that's not always evident or easy for a lot of people.
Mhm. So one thing that's coming up for me that is a question is when I've done organizational maps, the person deciding that we're going to have this social system map of an organization, there's a top-down dynamic to it that feels very so this is a core for me, a core tension between organization maps and network maps, and it's like bubbling up right now around this one, is how to deal with the fact that anything that comes from the IT department or from up above in some way that wasn't co-designed or co-dreamt up or co-desired by the rest, it's a solution that you saw that there, and this is often the case with social system apps, you see this as a solution to a bunch of problems that you're aware of, but many of the people in the network don't see those problems and don't see the solution as a solution to anything. They just see it as a new thing from up above or from IT or whatever. And I think that's a bigger challenge than who's on the map or who's not on the map, and then the concept of safety.
That's thank you. I think that's a very important point. And in our organization, it is not uncommon for people to feel top-down oppressed by central office departments, like including IT and others. So yeah, the intention has been to start to include other people in the design process and stuff. And in particular, part of our reorganization created a new division within the organization called Global Cohesion, which is meant to kind of like pull together stuff from around the organization. And related with that are thematic directors, folks who are new positions who are focused on those three themes, either in the US or internationally. And so I've started speaking to those folks, have not yet presented the whole kind of thing here. And part of the question is like, how far do I get before I start to really get them involved? I think they will want to be involved. I think they, so far, the superficial discussions I have had have been encouraging. But there's always this kind of like tension between how far to develop a prototype and a proof of concept and some examples so that people understand it, versus, you know, just more conceptual that they might not grasp the, you know, the
Yeah.
pieces of.
But it seems to me that part of the tension, the Seth, is that, so you have, the organization has made some changes. So you're going to do a new directory, or you've already done a new directory, true?
In the process of doing it.
In the process of doing it. So you are holding the tension, I think, in thinking through this project between network and organization. There is a tension there.
Correct.
You're going to have a directory. And at some point, somebody's going to say, okay, we just need to get an org directory. All right. But there's a tension that says that, well, we all know that organization directories don't incorporate what networks there may be within the organization that have value. But then there's the third element that you just talked about, which is global, what did you say?
Global cohesion, the
Global cohesion. And there seem to be three themes about global cohesion. So again, there's that tension, and global cohesion is kind of a network. You know, that there is a network that moves beyond or incorporates or the organizational directory of that. But essentially, you've got a project, it seems to me, where the organization is going through change, and you've got to do an organizational directory. What utility, and that kind of goes back to Jim's question, what do people feel, what do the participants want to achieve with the directory, you know? So at some point, Seth and IT, you are going to have to deliver something to the organization. And what utility does it have to really reflect the network and what gifts, as it were, people have, or what projects they're working on, and how do you get access to that?
right. I think that's a good point, and that does speak a little bit to Jim's question about, you know, what do the participants want to achieve. And of course, I'm anticipating, because I haven't surveyed them all about what they want to achieve. But I think that there's so much activity going on. There's so many people who have different experiences and visions and passions that I want to create an environment that is open to emerging ideas, emerging partnerships, emerging internal networks or other kinds of groups that might come about because people discover that there's some commonality of you know, approach, vision, passion, interest, experience, etc. We tend to be a little siloed. There's definitely you know, walls between the international folks and the US folks, between governance people and staff, between leadership and line staff, between people that are in the unions versus not in the unions, and stuff like this. And many of those differences come about, you know, are evident from the organization chart, which is all about reporting relationships. But in the network aspect of stuff, every element is co-equal with every other element, and so they have the ability to break down those barriers, and, you know, hopefully find new ways to connect and to you know, to collaborate as new things emerge, both internally and externally, because the world is changing and the organization's changing, and to try and accommodate that from more of a systems and emergent perspective, to create an environment that people can use to find and collaborate with one another.
So Seth, I'd like to take us back to the question you had about at what point do you invite co-collaborators? How far along do you get with your
Yes.
prototype? And I think the first thing that Richard said really is powerful in thinking about this, which is that you are holding the tension. Like, you have the tension between the organizational perspective and the network perspective in your head. And this is the whole project is an effort at sort of resolving or both ending with, like something new emerging out of that tension. But as long as you're the one who's holding it, you're going to be in this sort of isolated position of having to make the decisions and not knowing if they're the right decisions, and feeling like maybe other people need to be involved, but I'm not sure if I'm ready yet. And so it struck me as Richard was talking, that finding the others who are holding the same tension, and that might probably the cohesion group, or people whose job is to both help with the systems thinking approach and the complexity approach, because those people are going to be they should understand this tension and be holding it as well, and the cohesion, and to start to get their, maybe not give them prototypes. I'm discovering the earlier you actually start to give them something to look at and start to get their input, the easier it's going to be to start to figure out where the openings are and how to drive.
Well, that's encouraging, and I would like to do that, and I appreciate that perspective. That's an exciting thing to do, is to get it out of here and into other places. And I'd like to do that. I think that where I feel like I need to be deliberate and careful is that people are so busy.
Yeah.
They're so focused on what's at the top of their chart, that I don't want to, if I do it prematurely, it'll feel like I'm wasting their time.
So and I hear that. I mean, that's a really common concern. And so maybe and if you've already done this level, then just tell me to stop. But maybe a good place to begin would be to just identify a small handful of people that you think are probably holding this tension in their minds, that you would guess from their role are probably holding this tension, and ask them for 10 minutes to do a quick interview of what are you'd have to come up with some really good questions that are really focused and clear, that would help inform you. But what are the core puzzles that they're dealing with, and how do those relate to actual flow of information in the organization, and find some allies who are looking for something like this without knowing that's what they're looking for. And then those ones you can say, okay, well, I'd love to spend a half an hour with you at another point if you've got the time, so I can share with you the beginnings of a solution that I've been playing with and get your feedback. So like a really tiny intro to feel them out, to see.
And I think I've done that with several of them. There's probably a good 6 that are kind of the core people that would be good to do this with, and probably with half of them I've done that 15-minute level of introduction.
Yep.
I'm wondering about the advantages of doing it collectively with everyone.
The more you can get them together, that's another bandwidth issue. But the more you can get each other's voices, get people hearing each other's voices, the faster
So maybe it's a both. The strategy would be a both kind of thing, where like 15 minutes of scheduling with each of these 6 people can probably be done within a couple of weeks. And then it might take a month before we can schedule a half hour with everyone.
Yeah. And I'm always just saying, the thing is to find where like this tension that you're holding, find who's sharing that tension, and find the openings. And just, if the opening is a 5-minute opening, just figure out how to make a really targeted request for information in that 5-minute opening. And if it's 20 people in a meeting, if you can pull that off, that's great. But just to keep doing this sort of wiggling around, like in various channels, until you find until something opens up bigger, and then just keep feeling your way in. I've spent a bazillion years trying to second guess what do people want? How are they going to respond? And I've discovered that holding that in my mind just creates tension for me, and that, you know, there's a tension between spending too much of your time getting too much random information and opening it too broad. So but the more you can focus your questions, the easier it is to actually share that tension and then start getting creativity around it that isn't just yours and just your own energy.
Well, that's a good point. I noticed in preparation for this that at first I was going to go into other stuff. I mean, I did pare it down to just focus on what I thought this group would be most interested in or most effective at being able to provide input into, and left a lot of other stuff on the cutting room floor. And I think that that is a good lesson for approaching any different audience.
And what you did was really helpful, like how you organized your thinking and made it, you know, made it easy for us to absorb. That wasn't a 5-minute set of questions, but anything that's a visual that helps people sort of see how you're thinking about it or represents the tension, anything that you can do ahead of time that to help you direct the thinking so that you can find those openings will be, I think, helpful. But
Yeah, thank you. That's
I
good.
do think you need to start to get more input, even if you don't feel ready. Can we just like take a moment and then just look at Jim's question and see what other questions other people have or comments other people have? Are you ready for that, Seth?
Sure.
Denise, oh, sorry, I didn't see your hand up.
Oh, no, that's okay.
So I should have noticed it.
Yeah, no, it's okay. I was just saying, Seth, this might be basic, so you might already have thought of this, but I'm listening to you being concerned about wasting people's time. So maybe what you could do is with the meetings that you've had that were 15 minutes each, look for a pattern or a theme and then draw them back on, this is what I heard, and then kind of build on that. Here is what I want to discuss with you as a collective. So you're not asking the same person to come back twice to give them the same presentation or do whatever. And it kind of allows you to start sorting through, well, what are the common themes or discrepancies or whatever? Like, what did you find in the one-on-one meetings? And then share it with them and then say, do you kind of all agree in however, like the mirror board or whatever format that we use, but just to also kind of reinforce what Christine's saying. I think if you just set the parameters that you're telling people you're taking in their information, but you're going to make the final decision, but you welcome their information in a way, like just so that it's not that you have to get torn 1,000 different ways and they understand the conditions in which they're meeting with you, to bring people in early, but then by the end, they'll have fewer and fewer questions. I mean, I know you've done 1,000 maps before, but just in terms of balancing your concern about the time and wasting people's time. But I think, so I'm putting myself now, if you had asked me for a 15-minute meeting, why do you need to meet with me again? But I would love to hear what other people said, but in a very structured kind of format. That was it.
Okay, no,
That's
thank you.
very
That's helpful.
And one day I will talk to you a little bit more about your distinction between your organization and a network. I like that, your opening slide, but when we bump into each other another time, it's thinking of the way how NAPSI is set up. It's kind of like that. We're an organization and network, and I liked your distinction.
Yeah, thanks.
Anyone else?
Jim, I'm not sure if your questions were answered. I think that I'm hoping that participants, I know the participants want to connect and make their own work more effective and be able to express their own perspectives on the work, more effectively and collaboratively. And so, that's part of what I'm hoping will come out of here. And as I mentioned, the ability for emergence to occur. Any purposes the organizational leadership might have for the participants? I'm not sure what that question means.
Oh, it's just that if the leadership doesn't have a desire here that, we want participants to connect more around their affinities. We have these silos, we'd want to break them up. That's an organizational need for the participants. I was just wondering if there was any of that running around. The whole question really comes at this visual directory. It seems so obvious that if you can't see beyond your, I'm going to use the term network horizon, then you want something that helps you do it. So we have a visual directory that does it, but it isn't really a voiced need by the participants. It's just like, yeah, structurally, there's a need for this. So everybody has a need for a visual directory, or we just assume that, but it isn't necessarily, you don't really know whether participants will engage because they really have that need or not. So I'm just wondering what the level of clarity is about what do participants need for that whole box that you created about what are the network overlays outside of the organizational network? What are all these organic network that are out there? What are the needs around accessing that network?
Well, one of the aspects of the strategic plan is the commitment to various organizational development goals, including inclusivity and connection among people. So I think it ties into the whole strategic direction that we're trying to move. So I think it's a good point to try and couch this in the language that's been expressed for those needs.
Anyone else? Questions, comments?
I have
Jake?
another one, but I've been up, so I'll sit back. But if no one else has one, I've got one.
I just have comments. I really appreciate everything you're trying to do, Seth. That's really wonderful to see, which
Okay.
is a good reason to invite others like you to share, what you're doing and the challenges and so on. And I'm pondering sort of the maybe division who's paid and who isn't paid, and the value. It just my experience is that there's a lot of power in the contributions that aren't tied to an economic view. So I'm just appreciating the difficulty of including more in security and safety and all of that. And but just June Holly says the most transformative part of networks is self-organizing. And so I'm in my own experiences, the financially supported efforts aren't the most powerful ones.
That's a good point,
That
Mary.
I don't mean to make it a black and white, but
No.
we really underestimate and don't see the power of other kinds of capital. So I just wanted to make that comment, but I don't have any solution.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The governance people, the board and other governance committees are all volunteer. And we have other volunteers as well who work on various different projects and stuff. And so I think the tension comes in where there's various governance people, volunteers who are deeply embedded and have lots to contribute. There may be other volunteers from program folks out in Zimbabwe that have things to contribute and could have very valuable things to contribute. But the tension comes in about, where does someone sitting in an office in Atlanta, if they're sharing information, will they be more reticent to share it with a broad group of people that's less defined and with whom they have no accountability or connection
Mhm.
versus, a more closed group. And where to draw that line is attention. But to the point that, Richard and Christine have made, bringing other people into the decision-making process helps that a lot.
And it may be a line that shifts over time. It may
As long
be,
as it's transparent, as long as people
Yeah.
can know, here's who's going to see my words.
yeah. And as long as it's transparent and collectively informed. So that, it might
Definitely.
need to start closed, but it might loosen up as people get comfortable, and it's
Absolutely.
be the value of having more in there.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Tom, were you going to say something?
That's of a technical comment and a thank you. As Dual Element, a lot of the work you did in the technical side, as Christine said, maybe not everybody can do it, but for me, it was just important to see. I've kind of intuited a lot of this stuff is possible, but to actually see it done and see the flexibility that sumApp has behind the scenes to allow whatever's needed to come forward was just super inspiring to keep going. That what we're envisioning, is not going to be necessarily stopped because we hit a roadblock, or so that was really helpful to me just to see the technical side of it, as well as, the other stuff's incredibly important, but the technical side is not stopping you is really encouraging to me.
Good, thanks.
Yeah, Seth has been super creative. He pings and he says, "Can I?" And I'm like, "What now?" and then Tim and I sort of talk, and then I'm like, "Oh yeah, oh," and then we sort of. So I love that being pushed to the edges. That's a big plus for me, is just having that forced creativity, which I like. So we're just about to the bottom of the hour. Is there anything? Does anybody? How about if we do a one-word closing? So if we just want to say in alphabetical order, what we're taking away from this in one word. And Amy, I see you heard that and are jumping right in.
Inspiration.
That was my
What did you? I didn't hear you, Denise.
that was my word.
That's mine too. So
Thanks, Amy. Thanks a lot. Am I next? Oh, I am next. Aren't
well, if Kara and I
I?
go.
Oh no, you're next.
Okay,
Or
gonna
Kara
say
or you, right?
inspiration.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Kara's next. Did you want to say something, Kara?
Curiosity.
I was also inspired.
Oh, mine was inspired, but I'll try to think of another one at the end.
Okay, so who's next?
That might be
Um,
me.
Jim,
Just gratitude.
Mary,
Appreciation.
Richard. Oh, no,
Challenge.
Richard.
Mhm.
Great. Tom,
Encouraged.
Bill, William,
Culture.
culture.
Well, I feel gratitude as well for the community, for this particular session, as well as just for the community in general.
Thanks.
And for Christine for offering this opportunity.
I hope it was helpful in some way for you.
Yes, absolutely. It was helpful to get some perspective, to get some validation and encouragement about, including more people into the process sooner. You folks have seen more than almost anyone in AFSC.
Good. Thank you all. Have a wonderful, so we'll do our thing. 3, 2, 1. Wonderful to see
Thanks.
you.
Have a great
Bye.
week.
Thanks,
Bye.
Seth.
Thanks, Seth. That was great.
Have a good rest of your day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.